Moving an army efficiently across a battlefield is of huge importance if you want to have any chance of winning. A disorganized, disorientated, discombobulated mess of an army isn't going to have much hope against a prepared and organized enemy force. For the noobs, this comes in the form of not knowing their weapon, i.e. their mouse and keyboard. With a little bit of practice though and building some muscle memory, you can master your weapon and learn to control your army properly out on the battlefield. Now let's first address the underlying problem with why a lot of people don't know how to control their army very well. It's because they don't practice it and they don't try. And why is that? It's because they play defensive all the time. They'll just sit there and let the enemy come to them every single time, and they'll justify it by just saying, oh, I'm playing defensive. I'm a defensive player, that's just my playstyle. When in fact it just seems to be denial that they don't know how to control their army very well. And instead of addressing it and trying to practice by playing more offensively and aggressively and with some initiative, they'll simply opt for the defensive playstyle every time. They'll bring a lot of missiles, a lot of artillery, and will never really know how to control their army very well. Don't get me wrong, it's not that you can't ever play defensive or that playing defensive is a bad way to play, it's just that it's actually probably harder to play that way than it is to play offensively, believe it or not, especially if you're a newer player. This is for a few deeper reasons which we'll get into in future noob mistakes. For now though, if you're one of those players that always plays defensively, it's time to step up my friend and to learn how to mobilize your forces. So let's build from the ground up, go through a little army setup and some of the things we've learned so far. So here's my Orc Boy front line. Now we know we can't leave it like this because wind spells will wipe us out. Also it makes the line very narrow, so we're going to want to space it out, much like the first noob mistake hopefully taught us, making our front line units a little bit safer and a fair bit wider, which is always helpful. So we've got those units in place. Now we need some anti-large units to protect the flank. One of those at each end and then one in the middle as well, because you know monsters come everywhere these days, got to be prepared. So that's all our melee infantry. Now for our missiles, and again we've got to remember that we can't put them all in a line. The line of death is real, so you got to be careful, can't put them in a line. Spread them out so they can support each other if one of them gets attacked, and it also stops them getting messed up by magic or one unit taking out 3 of your units. So there's the main bulk of our army arranged, no lines of death or missile mobs to worry about. Now for our flanking units, got a couple of skirmish cavs. We're going to put these on the right flank. Again, we're going to space those out just in case they get fired at by anything. Makes them less likely to be hit if they're together. And then the same thing with all of our shock cavalry. Going to put it on the left hand side. Again, going to stagger it just in case wind spells may come along. That'll help them avoid damage, hopefully. And then we've just got our Lord and Hero, which we're going to put at the back. But there we have it. A large but well laid out Greenskins army. Now, how to control all of this? Well, I'm going to show you my control system with groups and how I use it. There's many different ways that many different players will use. This is just what I do. I put the main center bulk of my army in one group. Don't lock the group, don't bother with locking groups. It's not that great of a tool, it's a bit risky. I then put all my flanking units on the left in a group and all my flanking units on the right in a group. And lastly, my Lord and Hero I put in group 4 and 5, and I tie those buttons to my mouse so they're easily accessible on the fly, because those are 2 units I will need quickly in certain situations. So I can use the 1 key to select the center bulk of my army and move them around, only really useful for the first bit of the battle. I can use number key 2 to select all my units on the left, and number key 3 for all my units on the right. Now those 2 being 2 and 3 is very important because 2 and 3 is above W, which is where your middle finger is going to sit most of the time. 2 is to the left of it, so it controls the left units. 3 is to the right of W, so it controls the right units. And as I mentioned, my Lord and Hero are tied to 4 and 5, which I put on my mouse instead of actually using 4 and 5, because those 2 keys aren't that easy to hit in a hurry. But there you go, that's how I like to do it. There's many different ways to set up your control systems and your groups, but these groups are only really useful for the first few minutes of a battle, to be honest. Once the battle begins and you start engaging, your groups aren't really going to matter anymore because the units in the groups will be doing different things. Now for a few keyboard shortcuts, beginning with Control A, which will let you select your entire army, which is very useful for moving the entire army. You'll then want to hold Alt and left click on any of your units and keep the left mouse button held down. You can then drag the army to wherever you want. And if you need to rotate the army, you can then hold Control while still holding down the left mouse button. When you've decided where to put your army, you simply release the left mouse button. Be aware though that if you're still holding onto the Alt key, this will make your army walk to the destination rather than run. So make sure you release Alt before you let go of left mouse button, otherwise you're going to find yourself walking everywhere. So start by getting yourself in the habit of using those keyboard commands. The next thing to learn to do by habit is quick drag. When you drag a box over your unit to select it, do this, but just super quickly. A quick flick of the wrist and a hold of the left mouse button for half a second, and you can select that unit. This is the way a lot of people actually select their units and control them, rather than trying to click on them individually. So to put this all together here, I'm using Control A to select my army, Alt to move them up, Control to rotate them, and now I'm just using a lot of quick drag boxes just to move my units around. And you can do this on single units or multiple units. You can quick drag a box over a few cavalry that are all together or something like that if you want to select them all at once. But it's really a crucial technique to get in the habit of. Even top pro players, you'll see them using groups and selecting their groups via numbers to start with, but they'll very often fall back to using quick drag boxes anyway because they just require less thought and are an easier habit to get into than trying to remember to use the numbers all of the time. So using numbered groups and quick drag select boxes in combination is really the key to getting good and efficient at managing your army. You can see here I'm fighting this battle entirely with quick drag boxes, just selecting my units super quickly and then telling them where to go straight away. I know where I want them, just going to tell them to do it, not going to mess around. And it comes down to what is the matchup that I'm about to run into. If it's a bad matchup, then you probably want to run away and micro away from that unit that's about to attack you. If it's a good matchup for you, then you want to run into it. That's pretty much all Total War really comes down to. And for a couple of last useful controls, one that people often ask me about is, oh, how did you draw that custom route for your unit? Well, if you hold down shift, you'll see a little yellow zigzag come up under your cursor. Keep shift held down, right mouse button drag, and you can give your unit a path to run, wherever you want it to go. This is incredibly useful for flanking as it allows you to go round corners basically. Or you can do the same thing but just click the right mouse button instead of holding it, and you can create little checkpoints for your unit to run to get around corners in the same way. Personally for me, I just use drag though. So with all that in mind, you need to go and practice it. So here's a little exercise you can set up for yourself to practice using all these controls and building the habits. You can make just a simple little small army of just a front line, a few flanking units, a couple of missiles, a lord and hero, and practice using these groups and all these keyboard shortcuts. You could do this just against an enemy lord with no enemy army, so you can just practice the movement, or you could put a small enemy army of a similar size. Practice doing all of this quickly and finding the commands quickly on your keyboard. It won't take long for you to build some muscle memory of these and to be able to do it all without thinking. Try using the groups and see how you find that. Use quick drag select boxes and just try to get a feel for using all these different controls. There are other simple controls and keyboard shortcuts that can be very useful, like pressing R to make a unit run or to walk rather than scrolling all the way down to the bottom of your screen to click the run button. Things like that can be very useful just as a time saver, so you're not wasting your mental energy on tiny little menial tasks rather than all the important microing that you need to be doing. If you want to know more about different army controls, I do have a video on army movement, which is quite old from Warhammer 1, but it's all still relevant. The controls are all pretty much still the same, so go and check that out. I'll link it at the end of the video if you want to learn some more about some of the controls, about groups, just to give yourself a better understanding of your weapon, your mouse and keyboard. So there you go, another noob mistake that you may be making. If you're one of those heavy defensive players that actually just plays defensive because you're too afraid to move your army because you don't know how to do it very well, it's time to step up. Start practicing attacking your enemy, push on them, put some pressure on them, learn to micro your units all around with all of these different keyboard shortcuts and controls, and you will be a much better Total War player. You just need to get the reps in, get some practice, go into custom battles, do the little exercise I just said about. You got nothing to lose. It's only against the AI. No one's going to laugh at you if you lose. It's just about getting comfortable using the controls and being able to move your army around the battlefield. Because, as I said, playing defensively is actually a fair bit harder than playing offensively, for reasons I shall reveal soon. For now, I thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you in the future.